It started like any other quiet morning at my lakefront ranch, peaceful. Birds chirping, the soft sound of water brushing the shore. But by noon, that calm was shattered when an uninvited convoy rolled onto my property. A security team, hired by my own HOA, showed up without warning, claiming they had authority to remove unauthorized items. I thought it had to be a mistake. I've lived here for years, always paid my dues, always kept things clean. But no one from the board called, emailed, nothing. And now, strangers were tossing my belongings like trash. They didn't expect me to have cameras, and they definitely didn't expect drones. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. The HOA had been getting pushy, lately new board members, new rules, and zero communication. It felt like a power play. I was one of the few homeowners who didn't immediately bow down to the sudden changes. Maybe that's why they targeted me. Or maybe it was about something bigger. So I launched the drone not to provoke, just to get answers. And what that drone caught on camera, it wasn't just guys in uniforms moving boxes. It was what they were saying, how they were acting, laughing, careless, even breaking things on purpose. It was all being recorded, and they didn't have a clue. But here's where things really took a turn. Once the HOA realized I had footage clear, time-stamped proof of what went down, they didn't double down. They crumbled. One board member disappeared from meetings. Another tried to deny involvement, but the audio told a different story. The security company stopped answering calls. Suddenly, the tough talk was gone, replaced with silence and panic. I didn't go looking for a fight. I just wanted peace on my own land. But what started as a quiet pushback turned into something much bigger. And trust me, the fallout was only beginning. Stick around, because what happened next changed everything. To really understand how it got to this point, you need to know what was happening behind the scenes. This wasn't just some random security mishap or one bad day with the HOA. It had been building up for months. Ever since a new group took over the board, things at the lakefront community changed. Quietly at first, new rules about parking, then about landscaping, even the type of furniture you could have on your porch. All of it came wrapped in vague language and mailed notices that looked more like threats than guidelines. At first, I tried to go along. I trimmed a few trees they said were too close to the shoreline. Moved a shed 2 feet to the left because they said it blocked the view, but it never stopped. Every time I complied, another notice would show up. Meanwhile, I noticed other properties, ones that belonged to friends of board members, seemed untouched, even though they had the same violations as mine. Then came the real red flag. One afternoon, I caught a man with a clipboard taking photos of my ranch on my land without permission. He claimed to be from the HOA, but didn't show any ID. He left in a hurry when I asked too many questions. That's when I started keeping a record of everything: dates, letters, photos, and later, drone footage. I had a gut feeling something shady was going on. I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. Still, nothing prepared me for that day the security team showed up. What kind of HOA sends in private security without even talking to the homeowner? And why was there no paperwork, no notice? Just a group of guys in vests, walking in like they owned the place. Something was off, really off. And when I started digging into who exactly hired them and where that order came from, I hit a wall. Suddenly, people stopped picking up the phone. Emails went unanswered. Even the HOA website mysteriously crashed. But the more they tried to hide, the more it confirmed that there was a lot more to this than just rule enforcement. After the footage started making quiet rounds, shared privately with a few neighbors I trusted, I began getting messages. People who had stayed silent were now reaching out. Turns out, I wasn't the only one the HOA had been pushing around. One couple had been fined for installing solar panels without proper clearance, even though they had written approval. Another neighbor, an older gentleman living alone, had his dock torn down for safety reasons, yet no inspection report ever showed up. It wasn't just enforcement, it felt like a pattern, a targeted one. Then someone slipped a tip to me anonymous. No name, just a folded note left on my truck windshield at the local grocery store. It read, "Look into the new land service section 8B. That's the part of the lakefront where my property sits." I dug into public records, and sure enough, a new survey had been filed just weeks before the security team showed up. It redrew boundaries ever so slightly, just enough to suggest a portion of my ranch now overlapped with what they were calling community easement space. It didn't make sense. My land deed was decades old. But this new survey was slick, with fancy graphics and a seal from a surveyor I'd never heard of before. That's when I started thinking, was this about property? Access, maybe even development. If they could push me out, reclassify my land, suddenly there'd be a chunk of prime lakefront space up for use. The new board members had connections, real estate ties, zoning committee friends. I didn't want to believe it, but the puzzle pieces were starting to fit together a little too neatly. Meanwhile, the HOA sent a formal apology for the security incident, no signature, just a cold letter blaming miscommunication. But they didn't offer to replace any of the damaged items. No mention of the drone footage. No answers about the land survey. Just an attempt to sweep it all under the rug. And still, no one would meet with me face to face. Not the board president. Not the so-called property manager. It was like they'd all gone into hiding. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not with everything I was starting to uncover. Things started moving fast after that. A week later, a black SUV parked across the road from my driveway and just sat there. No one got out. No one knocked. It didn't have plates I recognized, and when I walked toward it, it slowly pulled away, no rush, just like it wanted me to know it had been there. That same night, one of my security cameras went offline. Nothing else on the property lost power, just that camera. Coincidence? Maybe, but it didn't feel like one. Then one of the neighbors who had confided in me suddenly went quiet. She'd been vocal, even sent me copies of letters she'd received from the HOA threatening legal action over non-compliant fencing. But now, her number was disconnected, and a for sale sign appeared in her yard almost overnight. No listing. Online, no open house, just a clean exit. Something about it didn't sit right. I started to wonder, was she pressured into leaving? Meanwhile, I managed to get in touch with a retired land surveyor who used to work in our county. I showed him the updated survey the HOA had submitted. He didn't say much, just shook his head and muttered, "This looks bought." According to him, the markings were off, the language was vague, and the timestamp didn't match the standard filing schedule. He said if that survey were ever challenged in court, it probably wouldn't hold. That gave me a small sliver of hope, but also raised the stakes. If I could prove the land had been tampered with on paper, this wasn't just about harassment anymore. It could mean legal fraud. So I started collecting everything's drone footage, phone logs, emails, witness statements, the original land deed. I even backed it all up to 3 separate drives in case something happened. And with every file I saved, I kept asking myself why. Why go to this extent over one piece of lakefront property? What did they know? Or what were they hiding that made getting me out so urgent? Then, just before I was ready to go public, I got a certified letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was just one printed sentence. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I stared at that letter for a long time. Just one line, "You're making this harder than it has to be," but it said everything. No signature, no explanation. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat, plain and simple. And it meant someone was watching. Someone knew I wasn't giving up, that I was getting close. But what came next? I didn't expect. A few days later, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. A woman's voice, shaky but urgent, told me she used to work with the HOA's legal team. She said she couldn't talk long, but I needed to look into a company called Silver Pines Holdings. I'd never heard of it. She said, they're not just board members, they're investors. Your property is in their plan. Then she hung up. That name stuck with me. I spent hours digging through local business records, tax filings, anything public. And there it was, Silver Pines Holdings had quietly acquired several lots around the lake over the past year, including a large parcel right next to mine. But none of it was listed under that name on the surface. It was hidden through shell companies. On paper, it looked like random purchases. But when I plotted it out on a map, a pattern started to form, a ring of properties, all surrounding my land. That's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to push me out. They needed my property to complete something. Maybe a development project, maybe a private resort. Whatever it was, I was in the way. And now, things felt different. More urgent. I started noticing cars slowing down in front of my gate. My mail began showing up opened. My power blinked off in the middle of the night, then back on. Small things, but enough to feel like pressure. I wasn't just dealing with a petty HOA anymore. This was bigger. Real estate, money, power, and TH.